Do you believe that walls can talk? That sometimes the very bricks around us hold stories too raw, too tangled to speak aloud? This is the story of a man who shattered hearts and trust in one swift stroke, erasing his unborn baby's name from the nursery wall. Little did he know that fate would carve that same name into the towering facade of his company's newest building. Love, ambition, betrayal, and redemption twist through every corridor of this tale. Buckle in for a journey that delves into hidden pasts and uncertain futures, where every character holds a key to a devastating secret. The late afternoon sun streamed through the tall windows of Alexander Haven's corner office at Horizon Global Ventures. The golden light cast a halo on the gleaming awards and plaques that lined the walls, each one echoing the success that the Haven family had worked generations to achieve. Alexander, a tall, imposing figure with silver-streaked hair at just 38, leaned back in his leather chair, drumming his fingers on the polished mahogany desk. His gaze cold and distant, fixed on an ornate pen, an anniversary gift from his wife, Cassandra. In that moment, the pen symbolized everything that had once been simple and hopeful in his life. Now it only served as a reminder of secrets he had kept the people he had hurt. He had always prided himself on his ability to control every variable in his life. But as the afternoon light drifted across the office, he realized control had slipped through his fingers the very day he found out Cassandra was pregnant. They had never spoken much about children before. Sure, there were the passing fantasies of a large family or a small one, depending on the day, but their careers always took center stage. Cassandra was a brilliant architect who had designed luxury estates from London to Bali. It was her passion, her calling. She had come from a humble background, and each building she created was a testament to how far she'd climbed. Alexander's phone buzzed. The name on the caller ID read Cassandra, and he felt a rush of guilt swirl inside him. She'd called 5 times that day, and each call had gone to voicemail. Now, perhaps out of reflex, he answered. Cassandra's voice was tight. She used his pet name, though the warmth that usually accompanied it was missing. "We need to talk. I'm at the house." Alexander swallowed. "I'll be there soon." He left the office without a backward glance, ignoring the stares of his employees as he stalked past glass-walled conference rooms. He drove to their estate on the outskirts of the city, a sprawling piece of land overshadowed by centuries-old oaks. The driveway alone was half a mile of winding pavement lined with perfectly manicured hedges. When he finally stepped inside, an uneasy silence welcomed him. Years ago, upon first acquiring the property, he and Cassandra had dreamed of filling those halls with laughter, children's voices, dinner parties, new memories. They even had a room at the end of the upstairs corridor, designated as a nursery, its walls once adorned with gentle pastel colors. A rocking chair Cassandra's grandmother had passed down, and a small name plaque they'd chosen for their soon-to-be child, the child who would never come. He found Cassandra in the nursery. The walls were now blank, the rocking chair shoved into a corner. She stood with her back to him, arms crossed, shoulders trembling. "What have you done?" Her voice was steady, yet thick with pain. Alexander closed his eyes for a moment. He had instructed the staff to repaint the nursery and remove all traces of the name they had once agreed upon Adrian. It had been a reckless, impulsive decision, one made out of heartbreak and the fear of being haunted by a memory of what could have been. Losing the baby had hit him in a place he never knew existed, so he did the one thing that made sense at the time: erase everything that reminded him of it. Cassandra turned, revealing tears clinging to her lashes. "We never even talked about it," she whispered. "You just had them remove his name, like he never existed." "I couldn't stand it," Alexander said, his voice low. "Couldn't stand walking by this room and seeing that name every day. It hurt too much." She stared at him, eyes glassy with betrayal. "Hurt too much? For whom? For you?" She took a trembling breath. "Because I still dream of him at night. I wake up and forget he's gone. And now there's nothing left of him at all, except the emptiness." His throat burned. He wanted to hold her, to promise her it would be okay. But the chasm between them felt too wide. Cassandra brushed past him, leaving only the scent of her expensive perfume and heartbreak in the air. He stood in the barren nursery, haunted by the absence of the name that used to be there. He thought about how that single act of painting over a memory had torn him and Cassandra further apart, and he wondered if they would ever find their way back. Yet destiny had other plans. The name he'd buried was about to resurface in a place he'd never expect, etched in stone on the facade of a building that would soon reshape both their lives. Long before he met Cassandra, Alexander Haven was raised in a world of opulence. The Havens were a known name in Massachusetts, their family wealth tracing back to old shipping lines that made fortunes in the 19th century. Over time, their empire evolved into real estate investment banking and eventually high-tech ventures. Alexander's father, Gordon Haven, was a formidable presence, meticulous, shrewd, and intimidating. He had raised Alexander with the mantra, legacy. First everything else, second. While this instilled in Alexander a relentless drive for success, it also planted deep insecurities. He had grown to view relationships as stepping stones or potential pitfalls. Even in personal matters, he measured the risk and potential reward. Growing up, he rarely visited friends' homes, almost never had a slumber party or carefree evening away from the watchful eyes of his father and their entourage of staff. He was groomed for leadership, taught to win at any cost. Cassandra Delgado was nothing like the women in Alexander's social circle. A self-made prodigy, her architectural breakthroughs in eco-friendly designs caught the attention of environmentalists, real estate moguls, and philanthropists alike, including Bill and Melinda Gates, who admired her commitment to sustainability. Some whispered that she was on the short list to design a new philanthropic research center that Mark Zuckerberg was rumored to be funding. No one dared question her brilliance. She had an almost mystical ability to see aesthetics and engineering as two halves of the same whole. They met at a fundraising gala for a children's hospital in Boston. Cassandra was there to pitch a new pediatric ward design concept, one that would integrate nature-inspired spaces to comfort children during treatments. Alexander, ironically, was there to represent the Haven family's charitable giving, something that always gave them positive publicity, though the real philanthropic intentions were sometimes overshadowed by the press releases. Their connection was instant, and it went beyond physical attraction. Alexander, drawn to her fiery determination, found himself opening up in ways he never had. Cassandra, for her part, saw in him a man who yearned for genuine passion outside his business fortress. They talked about innovative building designs, philanthropic aspirations, and the ways architecture could shape a better future. Where Alexander was methodical, Cassandra was creative. Where he built walls, she tore them down. They married quickly, too quickly, some said, and formed what Boston's high society regarded as the power couple of the decade. At first, Alexander integrated Cassandra into the Haven Empire, seamlessly trusting her insight to innovate in areas where the family's vision had grown stale. In turn, she reveled in the resources the Haven family's wealth provided, designing experimental complexes, advanced living facilities, and eco-conscious high-rises. Yet as the months wore on, Alexander's father Gordon began to question Cassandra's long-term loyalty. She wasn't from their world. Old money had a certain set of unspoken rules, and Cassandra wasn't one to follow them blindly. Over time, tensions rose. Cassandra refused to let the Haven name overshadow her personal identity. She pressed for her own brand recognition in architectural circles, which Gordon felt threatened the collective family prestige. Alexander stood uncomfortably between his father and his wife, often appeasing one at the expense of the other. Then came the pregnancy. For a moment, everything looked bright. Both Alexander and Cassandra believed that introducing a new life into their family might unify them in a deeper way. Gordon, too, softened at the idea of a grandchild to continue the Haven line. The baby would be named Adrian, after Cassandra's beloved grandfather, who had encouraged her to pursue architecture before he passed. The pregnancy also aligned with a major business venture. Alexander was spearheading an enormous real estate project in downtown Boston. He'd collaborated with City Hall to turn a derelict block into a modern corporate park, one that would bear the Haven name and stand as a testament to the family's ongoing influence. But fate was cruel. Complications led to a tragic miscarriage. Cassandra spiraled into grief, and Alexander retreated behind his stoic walls, shutting out his own pain. It was easier for him to bury it beneath new projects, negotiations, and deals than to face the magnitude of what they lost. And so the nursery remained untouched, a silent reminder until the day he decided to erase Adrian's name from its walls. The heartbreak in Cassandra's eyes that afternoon was not something that could be easily fixed. Their once tightly woven tapestry of ambition and love was unraveling. Little did either of them know just how violently the threads would be pulled apart by events lurking on the horizon. Time marched on. Work never stopped at Horizon Global Ventures. The real estate project that Alexander had been orchestrating, officially dubbed the Haven Complex, was inching closer to its grand unveiling. This multi-building campus promised to revitalize downtown Boston, merging state-of-the-art office spaces with green rooftops, large communal parks, and advanced energy-efficient technologies. Cassandra had contributed some early design concepts before her grief took her away from many responsibilities, and Alexander had allowed her that distance, not wanting to impose further stress. One crisp morning, Alexander's mind was spinning through a dozen tasks as he stepped out of his black SUV in front of the nearly completed Haven complex. He was there to do a final walkthrough before the massive media event scheduled 2 weeks later. Broad columns flanked an enormous plaza in the center of the development, lined with glass-clad towers that reached skyward. The sweet tang of fresh cement and the buzz of construction filled the air. His team of architects and investors trailed behind him, bustling with excitement to show off the progress. Alexander nodded politely, scanning the site with a practiced gaze. They crossed the plaza and approached the main tower, which soared upwards in shimmering glass and steel. A large ceremonial wall next to the entrance was reserved for a special unveiling, an inscription dedicated to the vision and future of the Haven legacy. Rumor had it that Alexander intended to carve a quote or place an emblem to commemorate the family's dedication to progress. Just as they were about to enter the tower, the site manager Miriam Kelly hurried up to Alexander with an odd look on her face. "Mr. Haven," she said, pushing her black-rimmed glasses up her nose. "We've discovered something on the decorative facade. It wasn't part of the official design, but it appears to be etched deep into the stone. It will take significant effort and time to remove." Alexander raised an eyebrow. "Etched like graffiti?" "Not exactly. It's a name, sir." She paused, swallowing hard. "Adrian." In an instant, Alexander's heart dropped. He stiffened. The mere mention of that name here in the heart of his largest development felt like a cosmic punch to the gut. "How did it get her there?" he demanded, voice taut. "We're still investigating," she replied, voice hushed. "It's small, but it's chiseled in a way that's deliberate, with actual stone carving techniques. Not just some random tagger with a spray can. It's on a corner of the decorative stone panel just to the right of the building's main entrance. We can remove it, but it will leave a visible patch unless we replace the entire panel, which might take weeks to reorder and install." A swirl of memories and guilt flooded Alexander. He could still see Cassandra's tear-stained eyes the day he repainted the nursery walls. Why here, why now? Was this some act of sabotage, or was it a bizarre coincidence? He turned to his team, feigning control. "Gather the crew. Let's see this for ourselves." They walked around to the side of the building near the main entrance. Indeed, on the lower corner of a heavy stone block, in ornate script no more than 3 inches tall, he saw the name Adrian. It glinted in the morning light, as if mocking him. The cut was smooth, professionally done. Alexander felt as though the ghost of his child had found a way to appear at the very heart of his business empire. The crowd of engineers and project managers murmured, but none dared speak the name aloud again. Everyone felt the tension rippling from Alexander. Finally, he cleared his throat. "Get the best stonemason to see if it can be carefully removed without replacing the entire block," he said, scanning their faces. "And I want a full investigation. Check security footage, see who came through here. This is private property. There must be cameras." Miriam nodded. "Yes, Mr. Haven." As the group filed away, Alexander stared at the etched name. Questions churned in his mind. Was someone trying to torment him? Or was it Cassandra, grappling with the memory of Adrian in her own anguished way? He knew she was a talented designer, but stone carving was not her skill set. Still, doubt flickered. He traced the letters with his fingertips, fighting the tightness in his chest. Adrian. A child who never got a chance at life, but who somehow kept reappearing. No matter how hard he tried to erase the name, it found its way back. The day after discovering the name on the building, Alexander hardly slept. Anxiety wrapped around him like a vice fueled by a new wave of tension at home. Cassandra, though physically present at their estate, felt emotionally distant. She had withdrawn to her personal design studio behind the house, offering no explanation for her absences or solitary nights. At the office, Alexander was met with an undercurrent of gossip. Employees whispered in hallways, exchanging glances when he passed. He knew they suspected something, that the etched name must hold personal significance. The Haven Empire might have soared on the wings of success, but it also flew through corridors built on secrets and half-truths. Desperate for answers, Alexander plunged himself into the security footage from the site. Along with Miriam and a small group of trusted IT specialists, he spent hours scrubbing through camera angles. They found little out of the ordinary, no suspicious intruders, no after-hours trespassers. The building's exterior cameras had either not been angled to that specific patch of stone or were obscured by scaffolding. It was possible that someone had hidden in a blind spot. But a near-total blank didn't satisfy him. He was certain there had to be more. Someone must have had both motive and access. Then a glitch on one camera's timestamp caught his eye. A short segment no more than 15 minutes was missing from the official logs. He turned to the IT specialist, a wiry young man named Conrad. "You see this?" Alexander said, pointing to the gap. "We're missing footage between 2:30 and 2:45 a.m. last Tuesday." Conrad tapped on his keyboard, sweat forming at his temples. "It looks like a forced corruption in the data. Someone with advanced knowledge of our systems might have done this deliberately." Alexander's fury rose. He felt his hands clench into fists. "We pay for state-of-the-art security, yet here we are. I want a list of everyone who had access to these cameras that night." Conrad nodded. "Of course, Mr. Haven." As the day wore on, a handful of potential suspects emerged: employees, contractors, or external tech consultants who had the clearance to handle or manipulate the security feeds. But none stood out as having a personal vendetta to carve Adrian into the building's facade. As far as Alexander knew, that name and its significance were known only to family and a few close friends. Just before evening, he slipped away from the office to pay an unannounced visit to Cassandra's personal design studio. It was a minimalist glass annex behind their main residence, filled with sprawling drafting tables, half-finished models, and large windows overlooking a secluded garden. He found her hunched over a blueprint, wearing a plain black turtleneck and leggings. She barely acknowledged him when he stepped inside. "We need to talk," he said, his voice gentler than he intended. The tension between them was suffocating, but anger wouldn't help. She shrugged, maintaining focus on the blueprint. "About what?" He took a step closer. The name etched on the new building. Adrian. "You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" She stood up slowly, her eyes narrowed in astonishment. "What makes you think I would do that?" Alexander exhaled. "I'm not accusing you of anything, but you've been distant, and I know how important Adrian's memory is to you. This could be some act of grief." She paced across the studio, frustration evident. "So because I'm grieving, I'd break into your construction site in the dead of night and carve our baby's name on stone. Is that really what you think of me, Alexander?" He winced at the use of his full name. "I just need answers." Cassandra's eyes brimmed with tears. "I can't even stand looking at that building. It reminds me of what you did to the nursery, wiping away Adrian's name like he never existed. I'm not stepping foot near your precious Haven complex, let alone defacing it." Alexander stared at the floor. Guilt and suspicion clashed in his chest. He wanted to believe her. Over the years, she'd proven herself to be honorable and true, even if they were drifting apart. She picked up a small clay model she was working on, a conceptual piece for a pediatric clinic in Honduras. "This is how I honor Adrian," she said softly, tapping the model. "By designing places that help children. Because that was our dream, wasn't it? To do something meaningful for families. That dream died a little the day you repainted that room." "Stung?" Alexander nodded, unable to muster a response. He turned to leave, pausing at the door. "If you remember anything that might help, or if you see anything suspicious, you'll tell me." She nodded, though her expression made it clear she believed if Alexander really cared about her, he'd know how deeply he'd wounded her. He left the studio feeling colder than when he'd arrived. Over the next week, Alexander's frustrations mounted. His father Gordon, who had been conspicuously absent for months, supposedly overseas on business, unexpectedly returned. Gordon always had a knack for appearing at the worst possible time. One evening, he summoned Alexander to the Old Haven mansion in Beacon Hill, the historic family seat that Alexander had avoided since his childhood. Alexander arrived to find Gordon waiting in the study, a cavernous room lined with dusty tomes and antique furniture that smelled like old leather. 2 crystal glasses of expensive cognac sat on the table untouched. Son Gordon said, his deep voice echoing. "I've been hearing rumors. Something about the name Adrian carved into your new building. Care to explain?" Alexander's jaw clenched. He'd never told his father the baby's name. That was a conversation he and Cassandra had reserved for themselves, at least until the time was right. But perhaps gossip traveled faster than respect for privacy in Boston's elite circles. "Nothing to explain," Alexander replied, forcing calm. "It's vandalism, and I'm handling it." Gordon's expression was measured. "I understand losing a child is hard, but you need to keep your head in the game. The city is watching, the press is circling. You're set to be the face of this grand opening. Anything that smells of scandal or strife will tarnish the Haven name." Alexander's shoulders tensed. "Is that all you care about? The name not once have you asked how Cassandra or I are coping." Gordon's straightened lips pressed into a thin line. "Grief is personal. I'm not your therapist. But I do know the family legacy must remain intact. If you can't manage to keep it that way, I will step in." The threat lingered in the room like a noxious gas. Alexander took a long sip of the cognac, letting the burn steady his nerves. He was used to his father's cold approach to family matters. Showing vulnerability in front of Gordon was akin to bleeding in shark-infested waters. "That won't be necessary," Alexander said, determined. "I've got it under control." Gordon nodded, but the glint in his eyes said otherwise. "I trust you'll do what must be done." Their conversation ended abruptly. Alexander left, feeling the old mansion's oppressive weight crushing him. He hated that place. It reminded him of lonely childhood nights locked away in a stiff bedroom, while tutors and nannies drilled into him that everything was about legacy and image. Back at the estate, he found Cassandra's design studio empty. A quick text revealed she had gone to New York for a last-minute architecture symposium. In the past, she would have told him about any travel plans. He knew she was pulling away, forging her independence again, and it both frightened and angered him. Days marched on with no new leads about the carved name. The IT team found no conclusive evidence, and the stonemasons insisted it would cost tens of thousands of dollars to fix the etched stone, and that was assuming the project schedule could accommodate such a significant delay. With the grand opening fast approaching, Alexander faced a choice: reveal the name at the event, and risk a media circus, or patch it in a rushed manner, leaving an obvious scar on what was meant to be a pristine facade. He tried to push it from his mind by immersing himself in finalizing the details of the opening ceremony. He'd invited a roster of high-profile personalities, local politicians, celebrities, and philanthropic figures, even hoping to secure a cameo from Warren Buffett, who was rumored to be investing in a sustainable housing initiative. The event in many ways was a tribute to the Haven Empire's commitment to the future. Yet as the big day loomed, Alexander couldn't shake the eerie feeling that the name Adrian was more than a mere vandalism or cosmic coincidence. It felt like a reckoning for the callous way he had tried to paint over the nursery, to bury the sorrow too quickly. At last, the morning of the grand opening arrived. A crisp autumn breeze whipped through downtown Boston, sending leaves swirling around the newly laid plaza. Technicians bustled finalizing the stage and sound systems. Towering banners bearing the Haven family crest fluttered from newly installed flagpoles. Alexander had spent the previous night practicing his speech in front of a mirror. He stood now backstage, wearing a tailored charcoal suit. Journalists with cameras angled for the best shot. Officials from City Hall mingled, and a small band rehearsed soft classical tunes. Despite the outward pomp, his mind was a tempest. He glanced at his phone, hoping to see a text from Cassandra, but there was nothing. She was back in Boston, but had not confirmed her attendance. He drew a slow breath, stepping onto the stage, as the announcer introduced him with a flourish. His speech began smoothly enough, praising Boston's heritage, the dedication of the City Council, the employees of Horizon Global Ventures, and the bright future symbolized by the Haven complex. He had a practiced way with words, honed by years of press conferences and philanthropic galas. Then his eyes caught a glimpse of someone unexpected in the crowd, Cassandra. She stood at the back, arms folded, her expression unreadable. For a moment his voice faltered, but he forged ahead. Applause peppered his speech. Lights flashed, cameras rolled. He concluded with a statement on legacy, how the Haven family strived to build not just buildings, but also hope for the next generation. The audience clapped politely. Alexander turned, motioning toward the large drape that covered the ceremonial inscription on the wall near the building's main entrance. As the drape fell away, it revealed the words, "For innovation, for progress, for the future." The crowd erupted in cheers, but the stone just beneath still carried the small yet haunting name, Adrian, now partially obscured by a subtle attempt at patchwork. The name remained legible up close, and soon curious murmurs rippled through the attendees. The tension in Alexander's stomach coiled. He stepped down from the podium, greeting officials and exchanging forced smiles. Media swarmed, some noticing the strange etching on the stone. He braced for the questions, though he prayed none would come. Yet they did. "Mr. Haven, can you comment on the name etched beneath your new inscription?" Alexander stiffened, but forced a measured smile. "We had a minor issue with vandalism. It's already being addressed." Before more questions could swarm, an older man approached someone Alexander recognized from his father's entourage, Charles Deering, a retired advisor who had served the Haven family for decades. His grey eyes flickered with concern. "We should speak privately," Charles said, guiding Alexander away from the crowd. They slipped into a side passage of the building's lobby. Smooth marble floors reflected the overhead lights. Charles wasted no time. "I believe I have information about who might have carved that name," he said. "I didn't speak sooner because I wasn't entirely sure, but new evidence came to my attention." Alexander's pulse quickened. "Go on." Charles fished an envelope from inside his coat. "Someone sent me still images from a CCTV feed, dated the night the carving must have happened. However, they're from an external camera across the street, not your official site cameras." Alexander took the envelope and peered at the black and white stills. The images showed a figure in a hooded jacket near the building's entrance. The figure stooped in the exact spot where the name was later found. Despite the angle and darkness, it was clearly not Cassandra. The person appeared stockier, with broader shoulders. He flipped through more images. One partial side view, though grainy, made his chest tighten. The face was partially visible, just enough to recognize him as Elias Ward, a childhood friend of Alexander's who had once worked at Horizon Global Ventures, but left under tense circumstances. Elias's family had once been in business with the Havens, but a few years back, Elias had been ousted amid a scandal that implicated him in a questionable real estate deal. Alexander hadn't spoken to him since. He looked up at Charles. Elias. Why would he do this? Charles frowned. He's harbored resentment for a long time. It's possible he knew about your baby's name. He might have learned it from staff or overheard it from your father's lips. Shaken, Alexander clutched the photos. It made sense in a twisted way. Elias was cunning, and if he wanted to strike at Alexander's psyche, carving Adrian into the building was a cruel but potent way to do it. But how did he manage to force a corruption in our security footage? Alexander asked. He's an IT expert, or at least he has connections, Charles replied. He could have bribed someone. Rage simmered in Alexander's veins. Elias had taken a private tragedy and warped it into a weapon. The whole fiasco with the building was to undermine Alexander, to remind him that no matter how high you climb, your vulnerabilities can still be used against you. Charles placed a hand on Alexander's shoulder. Be careful. Confronting him without evidence could be risky, but at least you now know who you're dealing with. Alexander nodded, pulses of adrenaline flooding his system. The revelation brought no solace. If anything, it deepened the emotional turmoil. He glanced toward the exit, spotting Cassandra watching him from afar. Her eyes flicked from him to the envelope in his hand, curiosity evident. He couldn't confront Elias publicly, not at that moment. But he had a sinking feeling that the worst was yet to come. That evening, after the event ended and the crowd dispersed, Alexander found Cassandra in the estate's expansive kitchen, rummaging for a late-night snack. The overhead light illuminated her exhaustion. She looked up as he entered the question in her gaze, wordless but clear. He set the envelope on the marble island. It was Elias Ward. She blinked, confused. Elias? I haven't heard that name in ages. He carved Adrian's name on the building. Alexander nodded, pulling out the still images and laying them before her. He had access knowledge and a grudge. It's all here. She studied the images, her face darkening. I still don't understand his motive. Revenge. I had to let him go from Horizon a few years back, after he'd jeopardized one of our major deals. He's held a grudge ever since. Cassandra let out a slow breath. So in his twisted mind, your grief became his ammunition. That's beyond cruel. Alexander reached for her hand, longing for a connection they'd both neglected. I'm sorry. For how I handled everything with Adrian. For how I erased his name from the nursery. None of this justifies that, but I want you to know I regret it. She didn't pull away. I know you hurt too, Alec, but it felt like you tried to wash him out of our lives the moment it got too painful. He nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. I was wrong. They stood in quiet sorrow, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. For the first time in what felt like ages, they seemed united by the same sense of loss. Finally, Cassandra spoke. What are you going to do about Elias? Alexander inhaled. Confront him, but carefully. For now, I'll gather more definitive proof. Maybe we can keep it out of the courts. I just want him to understand there are consequences. Cassandra set the photos aside. I'll help however I can. It wasn't a declaration of forgiveness or a renewal of vows, but it was a step one that made Alexander's chest loosen just a fraction. 2 days later, Alexander received a cryptic text on his personal phone. We should talk. I have information you don't want made public. The bar at the Old Derby on Salem Street, 9 p.m. Come alone. It was unsigned, but the message felt like a signature of its own. Elias. Alexander hesitated. This was precisely the kind of clandestine meeting that could lead to a confrontation. Still, he needed to settle the issue. The swirl of rumors around the Haven complex had grown. Several local blogs were speculating about the mysterious name. He couldn't afford for the gossip to infect the project's reputation further, or to exploit Cassandra's private grief. At 9 p.m. sharp, Alexander arrived at the Old Derby, a dimly lit bar with dark wood booths and an ancient, dusty chandelier. No sign announced who owned it, but it was an open secret that the place was a hangout for shady deals and hush-hush conversations. He spotted Elias in a corner booth, swirling a half-empty glass of whiskey. Shorter than Alexander, but built sturdier. Elias had a face etched by cynicism. He smirked when he saw Alexander approach. "I knew you'd come," Elias said, motioning for Alexander to sit. Alexander slid into the booth, crossing his arms. "You've got a lot of nerve. Carving Adrian's name. My baby's name into my building to prove some twisted point." Elias raised a brow. "It got your attention, didn't it?" Alexander bristled. "What do you want?" Elias sipped his whiskey. "An apology. Compensation. A chance at redemption. There was a time we were close friends, Alexander. I grew up with you. We planned on conquering the world together, but you kicked me to the curb without a second thought." "You committed fraud," Alexander hissed. "I had no choice." "You always have a choice," Elias corrected. "And I might have some interesting pieces of information that, if leaked, could shine a less than rosy light on your precious Haven empire. Not to mention some personal details about your marriage." Alexander leaned forward, his eyes aflame. "Is that a threat?" "It's business," Elias said, with an indifferent shrug. "But I'll consider it a personal favor if you reinstate me into Horizon Global Ventures in a senior capacity. Give me a stake in one of your next big projects. Let me back in the game." Alexander stared at him, a swirl of disgust and pity roiling. "You'd stoop this low?" Elias raised his glass in a mock toast. "Come on. We both know what your father taught us. Success is about leverage. I have leverage now." Alexander stood. "I won't be blackmailed." Elias shrugged, unbothered. "Then you can watch me dismantle your carefully curated world piece by piece. I wonder how the press would react if they learned the real reason behind that carved name. Or if certain financial transactions were put into public record." Alexander's fists clenched, but he forced himself to walk away. Engaging in violence or an open confrontation here would only complicate matters further. As he left the bar, Elias's eyes burned into his back. Outside, the chilly air stung his cheeks, matching the fury that flared in him. Back at Horizon Global Ventures, Alexander convened a small circle of trusted advisors: Miriam Kelly, Charles Deering, and an old ally, Jessica Freeman, the firm's head of compliance. They pored over files detailing Elias's previous projects, searching for any vulnerabilities or potential wrongdoing that Alexander could use as a counter-leverage. An exasperated sigh slipped from Alexander as they found only minimal leads. Elias's misdeeds were well documented from the prior scandal, but he had skillfully wiped most records beyond that. The man was cunning, leaving little behind that could incriminate him now. Cassandra, too, joined the meetings for the first time since the miscarriage. She offered a fresh perspective, though her role was mostly supportive. Alexander felt a glimmer of their old partnership, the synergy that had once made them unstoppable. Late one evening, while scanning the older architectural plans for the Haven complex, Cassandra found a cryptic note scrawled in the margins, a note referencing a specialized vault in the sub-basement designed for data storage, one that Elias had insisted on implementing when he was still with the company. "This sub-basement vault," she said, pushing the plan toward Alexander. "Do you remember authorizing it?" He furrowed his brow, scanning the document. "Not specifically. Elias was heading security protocols back then. He might have snuck it into the design." Charles leaned in, adjusting his reading glasses. "I recall some mention of a state-of-the-art data center, but we never used it. The project was scrapped after Elias left." Cassandra tapped her pen on the blueprint. If Elias had free rein to design it, maybe he stored something there, some leverage. Miriam nodded. He might be counting on no one remembering this vault exists. It's possible he's stashed files there that he can threaten to reveal. Alexander stood. "We're going down there." Under the cover of night, Alexander, Cassandra. Miriam and Charles slipped into the Haven complex. They made their way to the sub-basement, guided by the dusty blueprint and the flicker of overhead fluorescent lights. Occasionally, a distant hum of machinery echoed through the concrete corridors. At the far end of a deserted hallway, they found the entrance to the vault, a nondescript metal door with an electronic keypad. Miriam produced a small hacking tool, courtesy of their IT department. She set to work, sweat beading on her forehead, until a faint click announced success. Inside, they discovered a chamber lined with racks meant for servers that never arrived. The air was musty thick with disuse. It took them a while to find anything unusual, until Cassandra noticed a steel cabinet in a corner. It was locked, but with a traditional padlock instead of advanced electronics. Charles pried it open with a crowbar. Inside sat a single external hard drive, labeled HGV Archives. Next to it lay a dusty stack of documents. Their hearts pounded in unison. Alexander carefully lifted the drive. This must be Elias's stash. He rummaged through the papers, spotting spreadsheets, old memos, and references to questionable deals. Some were legitimate business records, others had confidential stamped across them in thick red letters. The final sheet in the pile drew his eye a ledger listing large sums of money, moving between shell companies, including suspicious references to a Delphi Holdings, a name Alexander had never encountered. They exchanged wary glances, suspecting that Elias had compiled these documents to blackmail the Haven family or any business partners. The question was, who was the real target? Miriam frowned. He might have documented wrongdoing in the Haven Empire, possibly your father's older deals, maybe your father's or your grandfather's, or he might have forged some parts to create false accusations. Either way, it's a time bomb. Cassandra brushed her fingers over the ledger. Could it be tied to your father's secret expansions overseas? I always found it strange how hush-hush Gordon was about certain properties in Europe and Asia. Alexander looked grim. This is more extensive than I imagined. My father might have skeletons buried in places I never knew existed. Charles cleared his throat. We should get these files analyzed, sort out what's real. If some of these are legitimate records, your father could face legal trouble. A wave of fatigue washed over Alexander. Elias had set a trap. Possibly Gordon was complicit in questionable dealings. If so, exposing this could shatter the entire Haven Foundation. But burying the truth would only empower Elias's blackmail attempts. After carefully photographing the documents, they left the vault, locking it behind them. Each step up the sub-basement stairs felt heavier. Alexander's mind raced with potential scenarios, from criminal investigations to media firestorms, but overshadowing all of it was the name Adrian. How the memory of his unborn son had been twisted into the crowbar that pried open these hidden secrets. The next morning, Alexander summoned Gordon to his estate, producing the files and confronting him directly. In Cassandra's presence, the older man examined the documents without betraying much emotion. Then he looked up, eyes icy. "Elias was always a snake," he said simply. "And you've proven yourself naive for letting him collect these." Alexander's voice shook with outrage. "Don't deflect. These deals offshore shell companies, questionable partnerships. This is bigger than Elias. Did you sign off on all this?" Gordon's jaw tightened. "I did what had to be done to keep our family's fortune intact." "Do you have any idea the lengths I went to ensure the havens remained powerful? We live in a harsh world, Alexander. Sometimes that means forging alliances and sealing deals in ways that aren't publicly palatable." Cassandra's hand flew to her mouth. "That's your justification for money laundering bribery." "Whatever else is in those documents," Gordon slammed his fist on the table. "Do not judge me. Everything I did was for the family. I built an empire for you, Alexander. And here you are, unraveling it all because some ungrateful friend decided to toss around petty threats." Alexander inhaled sharply. "Petty threats." "He carved Adrian's name on our building to torment us. Don't you understand what this means to Cassandra and me?" Gordon's gaze flicked toward Cassandra, momentarily softening. "I'm sorry about your child. Truly." But from a business standpoint, Alexander cut him off. "Stop. You can't reduce everything to business. This is our family." A tension-soaked silence stretched. Eventually, Cassandra intervened. "We need to decide what to do with Elias and with these files. If the media gets hold of this, your entire legacy is at risk." Gordon's lips thinned. "Offer him what he wants within reason, and bury this. The Haven name must remain unscathed." Alexander bristled. "No. I'm done paying for blackmail. We need to handle this differently." "Then handle it," Gordon said, rising from his seat. "But don't expect me to take the blame if you fail." He left in a swirl of expensive cologne and bitterness. Alexander clenched his jaw. Cassandra placed a tentative hand on his shoulder. "We'll figure it out," she said. But even as she spoke, fear tinged her voice. Days passed, and the pressure mounted. Alexander and Cassandra moved through the estate like ghosts, each lost in a storm of thoughts. Cassandra tried to break the silence more than once, but Alexander was too consumed with forging a strategy to defeat Elias without letting the blackmail files go public. One evening, as a cold rain battered the windows, Cassandra found Alexander in the study, staring at old family photos. He fixated on one of them, a shot of him and Cassandra in front of the nursery, just after she announced she was pregnant, both beaming with unrestrained joy. It felt like a lifetime ago. She sat beside him, sliding an arm around his shoulders. For the first time in weeks, he leaned into her warmth, letting out a shaky breath. "I keep trying to hold everything together," he whispered, voice hoarse. "But maybe it's time to let it fall apart, so we can rebuild honestly." Cassandra hesitated, her fingers stroking his hair. "What do you mean? I mean, maybe we come clean. Let the authorities see those documents, see if there's wrongdoing, and if it implicates my father, so be it. I can't keep living in this twisted circle of blackmail and secrets." A tear escaped Cassandra's eye. "That's a huge risk, Alec. It could destroy the Haven name." He swallowed. Our child was destroyed by secrets too. I never told you how I truly felt after we lost Adrian, how broken I was. I tried to bury it, and it only caused more pain. I don't want to bury anything anymore. Cassandra's tears flowed freely. She cupped his cheeks, searching his gaze. I've hated you for wiping out Adrian's name, for ignoring my grief. But part of me knew you were doing it out of your own heartbreak. I just couldn't face it. Maybe I needed to hate someone. Alexander held her close. I'm sorry. Truly. I wish I could redo it all, but this is our only chance to make something right. If I have to risk the Haven name for it, I will. They held each other for a long time in silence, the patter of rain mixing with the gentle hum of their quiet sobs. Bolstered by Cassandra's support, Alexander arranged a meeting with an attorney experienced in corporate wrongdoing and whistleblowing cases. Cassandra insisted on joining, placing her own name on the line if it meant forging a path toward honesty. The attorney, Janet Huang, listened intently as they recounted the story. Elias's blackmail, the suspicious documents, Gordon's potential involvement. Janet tapped her pen on a legal pad, her brow furrowed. You could absolutely go to the authorities with this, Janet said, but the repercussions will be swift. If your father is named, the press will devour the scandal. Your business empire could face asset freezes, investor pullouts. Worst case, you might be forced out of Horizon altogether. Alexander nodded grimly. We understand. But if we let Elias hold this over us, we'll never be free. Janet leaned forward, eyes intense. There is another approach. We can compile the documents properly, highlight any legitimate wrongdoing, and strike a deal with the authorities, cooperate fully in exchange for leniency, especially if you personally had no knowledge or involvement. Then you use that official stance to face Elias. If he tries to leak anything else, it'll either be old news or overshadowed by your proactive cooperation. Cassandra looked at Alexander, and he squeezed her hand. Let's do it, he said. A week later, everything unfolded in a maelstrom. Alexander handed over the stash of documents to federal investigators. Gordon, upon learning of his son's plan, erupted in fury, threatening to disown Alexander and disclaim him from the Haven fortune. In a heated exchange, Alexander retorted that no legacy was worth sacrificing integrity. The media storm was immediate. Headlines blared, Haven Empire under investigation. Stock prices wobbled. Enemies came out of the woodwork, piling on claims and rumors. Some of the documents did implicate Gordon in shady overseas dealings, though the extent of criminal liability remained uncertain. Elias, furious that Alexander had circumvented his blackmail, attempted to leak additional documents, but they were dismissed as either already in possession of investigators or irrelevant. The worst damage fell on Gordon's personal reputation. Alexander stood poised to lose a sizable chunk of the family wealth, but ironically his public image remained relatively unscathed. In some corners, he was hailed as a man who chose the moral high ground. Cassandra stood by him, offering unwavering support through the barrage of cameras and microphones. In the midst of chaos, they found themselves drawing closer, forging a new intimacy shaped by shared adversity and honesty. Amid the swirling fallout, Alexander decided to rectify his greatest regret. While Cassandra was away at a charity event, he snuck into the old nursery. Since the day he painted over the walls, the room had remained cold, empty, and lifeless. He reopened the sealed cans of paint, carefully mixing soft blues and greys, the same palette they had originally chosen. Next, with trembling hands, he painted the name Adrian in delicate lettering on the wall above where the crib once stood. He added small embellishments, little stars, a crescent moon evoking the night sky they had once envisioned for their child's peaceful dreams. When Cassandra returned that evening, she found him in the nursery, paintbrush in hand, tears slipping down his cheeks. He gestured silently to the wall. She pressed a hand to her mouth, eyes filling with tears. She joined him, picking up a brush and adding her own finishing touches. They worked side by side, recreating what had been lost, forging a small sanctuary, not for a living child, but for a memory that would always hold a corner of their hearts. Afterward, they slumped together on the floor, leaning against the freshly painted wall. For the first time, the name Adrian brought them solace instead of sorrow. Several months later, the investigations concluded. Gordon faced penalties, steep fines, partial relinquishment of overseas assets, and a forced retirement from the board of Horizon Global Ventures. Alexander took the reins fully, albeit under the scrutiny of new compliance measures. The company survived battered but intact. For many employees, Alexander's willingness to confront corruption ignited a renewed faith in Horizon's future. Elias vanished from Boston's high society rumors, swirling that he fled the country. With no leverage left, his name faded into the background. Few missed him. During a quiet afternoon, Alexander and Cassandra strolled hand in hand through the Haven Complex Plaza. They paused at the stone panel near the entrance where Adrian had once been etched. A faint outline of the letters was still visible even after professional repairs. Instead of resentment, Alexander felt a gentle pang of remembrance. Cassandra rested her head on his shoulder. It's strange how it all turned out. Adrian's name brought so much conflict, but in the end, it brought us back together. Alexander nodded softly, kissing her temple. It's not the way I would have chosen, but I guess fate finds odd ways to guide us. She smiled through lingering sadness. I've been thinking a lot about the future, about maybe trying for another child one day. The corners of Alexander's mouth lifted. I'd like that, he whispered. And he knew, despite the scars, they were stronger than before. That evening they returned to the estate. Outside the nursery, Cassandra paused, placing her palm on the fresh paint. They didn't need to erase Adrian's memory anymore. Love and acceptance had replaced denial and guilt. In time, they would fill that house with laughter, and maybe, just maybe, Adrian's name would become a whisper of hope rather than a cry of loss. And there you have it, a tale of ambition and heartbreak, where a single etched name tore through family secrets and forced a reckoning that no one saw coming. In the end, Alexander and Cassandra found the courage to face the ghosts that haunted them, to stand up against blackmail, and to carve a new path defined not by hidden deals or erased memories, but by honesty and love. If this story resonated with you, reminding you that every challenge can be an opportunity to rediscover what truly matters, then help us share that message. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that delve into the heart of human drama tales of triumph, tragedy, and the unbreakable bonds that hold us together. Thank you for being part of this journey. We'll see you in the next story. What happens when a man throws away a diamond for a piece of glass? Marcus Thorne. Had it all: a brilliant, loving wife, a baby on the way, and a company on the rise. But it wasn't enough. He traded his pregnant wife, Mina, for a younger model, leaving her with nothing but divorce papers and a broken heart. He told her she was a burden he was shedding. 4 years later, Marcus is desperate, his company failing, begging for a buyout from a mysterious, silent billionaire. He walks into that final boardroom meeting expecting a savior, but what he finds is his past. And the woman he destroyed is now the only person who can destroy him. The rain against the penthouse window was a cold, rhythmic drumming, a miserable soundtrack to a life that had suddenly lost its melody. Mina Hayes. No, she was still Mina Thorne. For now stared at the skyline of Seattle, but the city lights were just a watery blur. She was 7 months pregnant, and the weight of the baby boy under her heart was the only thing that felt real. Everything else had just detonated. Her husband, Marcus Thorne, CEO of Thorne Dynamics, was standing by the sleek minimalist fireplace, his back to her. He hadn't even taken off his $3,000 Tom Ford overcoat. "Marcus, please," Mina whispered, one hand pressed against the tight swell of her stomach. Just look at me. Tell me this is a joke. A sick, horrible joke." Marcus turned slowly. His face, which used to be her entire world, was now a mask of cold impatience. He was handsome, with sharp patrician features and eyes the color of steel. It was a face that charmed venture capitalists and disarmed competitors. Tonight it was aimed at her. "It's not a joke, Mina," he said, his voice clipped. "I'm leaving. The divorce papers will be sent to you by my lawyer, Jonathan Pierce, tomorrow morning." "Divorce." The word came out as a strangled gasp. "Marcus, I'm carrying your son." He actually winced at that, a flicker of annoyance. Don't do that, Mina. Don't use the baby as a bargaining chip. It's unseemly. A bargaining chip. She could feel a hysterical laugh bubbling in her throat, mixing with the bile. "He's our child." "He will be your child," Marcus corrected, finally shrugging off the coat and tossing it onto a white leather chair. He walked to the bar, his movements precise, and poured himself 2 fingers of Macallan 25. He didn't offer her one, not that she could drink. "I will, of course, provide the legal minimum in child support. I'm not a monster." Mina felt the floor tilt. This wasn't happening. This was the man who just 6 months ago had wept with joy at the first ultrasound. The man who had built his entire company, Thorne Dynamics, from a single algorithm she had helped him design in their tiny college apartment. She had been his partner in everything. Why? She finally asked, the one-word question loaded with 5 years of shared history. Marcus swirled the amber liquid in his glass. "Because I'm tired, Mina. I'm tired of this." He gestured vaguely around the multi-million-dollar apartment. "I'm on the verge of something huge. Thorne Dynamics is about to go global. I need a partner who can keep up, who excites me. Someone who reflects my success. And I don't." Her voice was small. She hated how small it sounded. He let out a sigh, the kind one reserves for a difficult employee. "Mina, look at yourself. You've let yourself go. This pregnancy, it's all you talk about. You've lost your fire. You used to be a brilliant architect, and now you're just a vessel." Each word was a physical blow. She clutched the back of the sofa, her knuckles white. "I'm growing our family, Marcus. The family you said you wanted." "I wanted the idea of it," he said, downing the scotch. "The reality is messy. It's a burden, and I can't afford any burdens right now." That's when she saw it. On his phone, which he'd left face up on the bar. A new lock screen image. It wasn't the photo of them in Cabo. It was Marcus grinning on a yacht, his arm wrapped tightly around a woman with impossible legs and bright blonde hair. Mina recognized her instantly. Serena Vance. The 22-year-old model who was the new face of Thorn Dynamics' marketing campaign. Her, Mina breathed, pointing. You're leaving me. For her, Marcus had the decency to look momentarily flustered. He snatched the phone. Serena understands me. She understands the demands of my world. She's an asset, Mina. She looks good on my arm, and she doesn't demand things from me. She doesn't have all this need. I need my husband. Mina finally shouted the dam of her shock breaking. I need the father of my child to not abandon me for a child. She's 22, Marcus snapped, and she's more of a woman than you've been in months. And this is done. He walked to the door. I've already packed a bag. It's in my car. The driver is waiting. My lawyer will be in touch. I suggest you get your own. He paused his hand on the polished steel door handle. I'd also suggest you move out quickly. He added, his voice devoid of all emotion. This apartment is tied to the company, and I'll need it for corporate functions. You can go back to your sisters, I suppose. And with that, he was gone. Mina stood in the echoing silence of the penthouse, the rain lashing the glass. She looked at the empty Scotch glass on the bar, at the indentation on the chair where his coat had been. It was as if he had never existed. She slid down the back of the sofa until she was sitting on the cold marble floor. The baby kicked a hard, sudden jab under her ribs, as if he too could feel the sudden icy void. It's just us now, she whispered to her stomach, as the first real agonizing sob tore itself from her chest. It's just us. The humiliation was a physical sour taste that lingered for weeks. Moving out of the penthouse was a blur of sympathetic turned pitying looks from the building's concierge. Marcus, in a final act of petty cruelty, had his assistant, a sharp-faced young woman named Janice, oversee the move, ensuring Mina took only her personal effects. She ended up in the spare bedroom of her sister Chloe's cramped two-bedroom apartment in Bellevue, across the water from the glittering prison of her old life. The room was painted a cheerful but nauseating lavender, and smelled faintly of Chloe's cats. Chloe, ever the pragmatist, was furious. He's a monster, Mina, a sociopath. He didn't just leave you. He tried to erase you. That algorithm. You wrote the core code for that. You have a claim. But Mina was too broken to fight. She was 32 years old, heavily pregnant and unemployed. She had given up her own promising career as a senior software architect at Microsoft to help Marcus build Thorn Dynamics from scratch. She was a co-founder in spirit, but her name was on none of the incorporation documents. Marcus had insisted it was cleaner to keep it all in his name, that it was all for their future anyway. She, in her love-blinded haze, had agreed. The divorce proceedings were swift and brutal. Marcus's lawyer, Jonathan Pierce, was a shark in a bespoke suit. He painted Mina as a gold digger, despite the fact she'd been with Marcus when he had nothing but student debt and a bad haircut. Mr. Thorne is offering a one-time settlement of $50,000. Pierce said, his voice smooth as polished stone in a sterile conference room. In exchange, Ms. Hayes, he made a point of using her maiden name, will waive all future claims to Thorn Dynamics, its assets, and any future earnings. Mina's legal aid lawyer, a well-meaning but overwhelmed woman named Sarah, scoffed. That's insulting. We're talking about a company valued at over $50 million, and there is the matter of the child. Pierce smiled a thin reptilian expression. Mr. Thorne is prepared to meet the state-mandated minimum for child support. The $50,000 is generous. It's a fresh start fund. If you fight this, we will drag it out. We will counter-sue for emotional distress. We will prove Ms. Hayes was a destabilizing factor, and her condition made her erratic and unfit. Take the deal, Ms. Hayes. Mina looked at her sister, then at her own trembling hands. She had no money to fight. A protracted legal battle would last longer than her meager savings. She was about to give birth. "I'll take it," she whispered the words, feeling like ash in her mouth. 2 months later, Liam Hayes was born. He was small, perfect, and had Mina's deep blue eyes. The moment the nurse placed him in her arms, the fog of her despair began to recede, replaced by a fierce protective instinct that was as sharp as steel. This tiny 7-pound creature was her new center of gravity. Marcus did not come to the hospital. He sent a comically large teddy bear with a Thorne Dynamics logo stitched onto its paw. Mina had Chloe throw it in the dumpster. Life became a rotation of 3 a.m. feedings, diaper changes, and staring at her dwindling bank account. The $50,000 after paying for the hospital bills and her legal aid was evaporating. She was a ticking clock. When Liam was 3 months old, a letter arrived. It was addressed to Ms. Mina Hayes at Chloe's apartment. The envelope was thick, creamy cardstock with the return address of a law firm she'd never heard of, Harrison and Stone, LLP. "Please, God, don't let it be Marcus again," she muttered, tearing it open with one hand while balancing Liam on her hip. The letter was brief. It was not from Marcus. It was from the estate of a Mr. Arthur Pendleton. "Dear Miss Hayes, we are the legal representatives for the estate of your great-uncle Mr. Arthur Elias Pendleton. Mr. Pendleton passed away peacefully last month. You have been named the primary beneficiary of his estate. We request your presence at our offices at your earliest convenience to discuss the details of the bequest." Mina stared at the name. Arthur Pendleton. She hadn't seen him since she was 10 years old. He was her grandmother's eccentric, reclusive brother, a man who lived in a sprawling, dark house on Orcas Island and was rumored to be difficult. Her family had mostly forgotten he existed. "A beneficiary," she said to Chloe, who was reading over her shoulder. "He probably left me a box of old books." "Hey, we can sell them," Chloe said, ever practical. "Go. What have you got to lose?" The next day, Mina bundled Liam into a borrowed car seat and drove to the offices of Harrison and Stone. They were in an old, prestigious building downtown, the kind with polished mahogany and brass fixtures. She felt small and shabby in her maternity jeans and a faded t-shirt. She was ushered into a vast, book-lined office. A man in his late 60s with a kind face and sharp, intelligent eyes stood to greet her. "Ms. Hayes, I'm Robert Harrison. A pleasure. And this," he said, smiling warmly at Liam, "must be the newest edition." "This is Liam," Mina said, her voice shaking slightly. "Mr. Harrison, I think there's been a mistake. I barely knew my Uncle Arthur." "There's no mistake," Robert Harrison said, gently gesturing for her to sit. "Arthur was a very specific man. He wasn't fond of, well, most people. But he was fond of you. Me. He sent me a logic puzzle book for my 10th birthday. That was it." "He remembered that," Harrison said, sitting opposite her. "He said you were the only one in the family who ever solved the puzzle on the inside cover. He's been following your career. He admired your work at Microsoft. He was, to put it mildly, furious when you left to support your husband's venture. He called Marcus Thorne a fool in a hurry. Mina's jaw dropped. Arthur, Mr. Harrison continued, was not just difficult. He was particular. He was also Mitz Hayes, the founder of Penned Data Solutions, which he sold to IBM in 1994 for an astronomical sum. He spent the last 30 years living quietly and managing his investments. He slid a thick portfolio across the desk. Arthur had no children. He despised the rest of his family, but he saw his own mind in you. He has left you as the sole beneficiary, his entire estate. Mina opened the portfolio. Her eyes scanned the summary page, but the numbers didn't make sense. They were just strings of zeros. I don't understand, she whispered. What is this that who, Mr. Harrison said, is the controlling interest in a private equity firm, Pendleton Capital Ventures. It also includes a diversified portfolio of tech stocks, real estate holdings, and liquid assets. To put it in layman's terms, Ms. Hayes, your great-uncle has left you an estate valued at approximately $2.8 billion. Mina looked at the sleeping baby in her arms. Then she looked at the number on the page. Then she looked at Mr. Harrison, and for the first time in 6 months, she laughed. It was a wild, sharp, disbelieving sound that filled the stuffy office. The thread she had been hanging from wasn't a thread at all. It was a steel cable. The next 6 months were a blur of lawyers, accountants, and sleepless nights. But this time, the sleeplessness wasn't just from a crying baby. It was from a mind whirring back to life, absorbing information at a speed that stunned the old guard board of Pendleton Capital Ventures. Mina Hayes, billionaire, was a title that felt like a costume, but Mina Hayes, architect, was who she had always been. She had designed complex software systems. A multi-billion-dollar investment firm, she learned, was just another system. It had inputs, outputs, protocols, and inefficiencies. And Mina was very, very good at finding inefficiencies. She did not go on a shopping spree. She did not buy a penthouse. Instead, she bought a sensible, secure brownstone in a quiet neighborhood, hired a discreet and highly qualified nanny named Maria, and promoted Robert Harrison from estate lawyer to CEO of Pendleton Capital, with one caveat: he would be her mentor. I don't want to be a passenger, Robert, she told him, bouncing a giggling 6-month-old Liam on her knee in the new sunlit office she'd had built in her home. I don't want to be a Hayes heir who just cuts ribbons. Arthur left this to me because I could solve a puzzle. This is the biggest puzzle of all. I want to run this. Harrison, who had been bracing for a flighty, grieving woman, found himself facing a focused, ice-cold intellect. He was delighted. Very well, Madam Chairwoman, he'd said, a smile playing on his lips. For the next 4 years, Mina worked. While Liam slept, she studied market analysis, leveraged buyouts, and corporate law. She learned the difference between a predator and prey in the corporate world. She learned to speak the language of power, a language that was all subtext and implied threat. She cut her long brown hair into a sharp, efficient bob. Her wardrobe of faded jeans was replaced by bespoke architectural pieces from Acris and the Row. She wasn't hiding herself. She was armoring herself. She proved to have an instinct for the market that was almost supernatural. It wasn't magic. It was logic. She had been a coder. She saw the patterns. She saw which tech startups were built on hot air and which were built on solid code. Pendleton Capital Ventures, under her silent guidance, became the most aggressive and successful tech investment firm on the West Coast. She became the Seattle Shadow, a mysterious new player who never appeared in public, but whose name on a term sheet made markets move. And all the while she was a mother. She was there for Liam's first steps. She was there for his first day of preschool. She read him Goodnight Moon every single night. Her life was a fortress of two halves, the soft, warm love for her son, and the cold, precise ambition of her work. One person, however, was not having a good 4 years. Marcus Thorne. On the surface, his life was perfect. He and Serena Vance were the darlings of the Seattle social scene, their Instagram feeds a curated fantasy of polo matches, charity galas, and trips to St. Bart's. Serena now. Serena Thorne was a lifestyle influencer. But behind the filters, Thorne Dynamics was bleeding. Marcus had done exactly what Arthur Pendleton had predicted. He was a fool in a hurry. Flush with his initial success and desperate to fund his and Serena's lavish lifestyle, he had expanded too fast. He'd poured millions into flashy marketing campaigns, all starring Serena, of course, and a disastrous new product line of smart jewelry that was buggy ugly and a critical flop. He had taken on massive debt to fuel the expansion. He had borrowed against the company's future, convinced the next big hit was just around the corner. Now the creditors were calling. The interest payments were crippling. Thorne Dynamics, once valued at $50 million, was now a company drowning in $70 million of debt, desperately trying to sell itself before the banks seized its assets. On a rainy Tuesday in March, 4 years after he had walked out on his pregnant wife, Marcus Thorne sat in his sterile, glass-walled office, his head in his hands. "Jonathan," he barked into his speakerphone at his lawyer, "tell me you have some good news. Anyone. I don't care who. Find me a buyer." "It's not good, Marcus," Jonathan Pierce's voice crackled back. "Everyone sees the debt. You're toxic. No one will touch you. Except maybe one." Marcus sat up, hope flaring. "Who? I'll take it. Who?" "A new private equity firm. Very aggressive, very private. They're called Pendleton Capital Ventures. They've been quietly asking questions. They might be interested in an acquisition." Marcus had never heard of them. "Pendleton. Like the blankets, I don't care. Set up the meeting. Offer them anything. Just get me in a room with them." "They don't do meetings like that, bitter Marcus. They're sharks. Their CEO is a man named Robert Harrison. All communication goes through him. And he's already sent a preliminary offer." "What is it?" Marcus demanded, pacing. "It's low, Marcus. They're offering to assume all outstanding debt. In exchange, they get 100% of the company." Marcus stopped. "So, I get nothing. Zero. You get to walk away without $70 million in personal liability, which, by the way, you are absolutely on the hook for. It's the only offer on the table. In fact, it's the only offer you're likely to get. They want to meet Friday to finalize the due diligence." Marcus looked at a framed photo of himself and Serena on a red carpet. He looked at his beautiful office. He was 37 years old, and he was about to be completely wiped out. "Fine," he spat. "Book the meeting. I'll go. I'll meet this Harrison. I'll convince him. I'll convince him my brand, my name is worth something. I'll get an equity stake. I'll get something." He had no idea he was a lamb meticulously fattened, walking willingly to the slaughter. Mina sat in what her team called the war room. It was a secure, soundproofed chamber in the sub-basement of her brownstone, linked directly to the Pendleton Capital offices. The walls were a mosaic of data screens, and at the center was a long black conference table. "He's panicking," said David Chen, her head of acquisitions, a man she'd poached from Goldman Sachs. He's trying to get a face-to-face with Mr. Harrison, hoping to charm his way into a better deal. Mina looked at the live data feed of Thorn Dynamics stock, which was now trading in pennies. He believes his charm is an asset. Let him. Robert knows how to handle him. Madam Chairwoman, Robert Harrison's voice chimed in from the head speaker. Thorn's lawyer just confirmed he will be at our offices Friday at 10 a.m. for the final review. He still believes this is a negotiation. It is not a negotiation, Mina said, her voice quiet. It's a formality. David, what's the status on the debt? We own it, David said with a wolfish grin. All of it. We spent the last 6 months buying it up from his creditors at pennies on the dollar. The banks were so desperate to get it off their books, they practically gave it to us. He's not in debt to the banks anymore, Mina. He's in debt to us. We are the creditor, the debtor, and the sole interested buyer. It's a closed loop. Mina nodded a slow, deliberate motion. Perfect. Is the other matter handled? David's grin widened. The Serena Thorn file. Oh yes. Her influencer agency, Vance Lifestyle, is leveraged to the hilt by the same bank that held Marcus's primary note. We acquired their debt as part of the package. As of this morning, we own her too. We just haven't told her yet. Good, Mina said. One thing at a time. The meeting on Friday. I will be there. There was a sudden silence in the room. Even Harrison on the speaker seemed surprised. Mina, are you sure you've never attended an acquisition finalization? It's unnecessary. Your anonymity is your greatest asset. It's necessary for this one, Robert, she said. She looked at a small framed photo on the edge of her desk. It was of Liam, age 4, missing his 2 front teeth and grinning. He won't be negotiating with you, Robert. He'll be signing the papers, and then you will bring him to the main boardroom. I will be waiting. As you wish, Harrison said. The next few days were for Marcus a fever dream of false hope. He practiced his speech in the mirror. He was Marcus Thorn, the innovator. He would make them see. He'd convince this Harrison person to keep him on as CEO. He'd get a golden parachute at least. Serena was, for the first time, not helpful. This is so stressful, Marcus, she whined, filming herself with a new skin-firming wand for an Instagram post. Are you sure we're going to be okay? My agent just called and said our spring campaign was under review. What does that even mean? I'm Serena Thorn. It means nothing, baby, Marcus said, straightening his tie, the knot suddenly feeling tight as a noose. I'm going to fix it. I'm going to meet this Pendleton Capital Group and I'm going to fix it. This Harrison guy, he's just an old money suit. He won't know what hit him. On Friday morning, Marcus kissed Serena goodbye. She barely looked up from her phone, texting someone named Alexei about a potential collaboration in Dubai. Marcus stepped out of his gleaming and leased Maserati and into the lobby of the Pendleton Tower. It was a monument of glass and steel that dwarfed his own rented office space. He felt a sudden, unwelcome pang of inadequacy, which he quickly smothered with arrogance. He was escorted to a conference room on the 30th floor. Robert Harrison was waiting. He was exactly as Marcus had pictured, old grandfatherly, and Marcus assumed soft. Mr. Thorn, a pleasure. I am Robert Harrison. Mr. Harrison, Marcus said, flashing his trademark smile, the one that had won him millions. Call me Marcus. I'm ready to discuss the future of Thorn Dynamics. Excellent, Harrison said, sliding a thick document across the table. The future is, as you know, with us. This is the final transfer agreement. We assume all debt. You sign over all assets, including intellectual property and brand trademarks. Please sign on page 4, 12 and 33. Marcus stared at him. Wait, we're not going to discuss terms. My role, I'm the face of this company. I am Thorn Dynamics. Harrison looked at him over the top of his spectacles. Mr. Thorn, with respect, Thorn Dynamics, is a failing entity with $70 million in debt. Its only value is in its core algorithm, which our team believes can be salvaged. You, your face, as you put it, has no asset value on our books. In fact, your personal brand is considered a liability. You will have no role. A liability? Marcus sputtered, his smile freezing. You are Mr. Thorn, what we call a founder failure. You built something and then you broke it with your ego. Now please sign, or we can simply call in the debt we hold. All $70 million of it. Today. At which point we will seize the assets and pursue you in personal bankruptcy. The choice is yours. Marcus's blood ran cold. He had never not once considered that they held the debt. He thought they were just a buyer. He was trapped. Utterly, completely trapped. His hands were shaking. The pen felt slick in his grip. He looked at Harrison, who was watching him with the placid disinterest of a biologist observing a specimen. Where do I sign? Marcus whispered. He signed. He signed away his company, his name, his entire life's work, for nothing. Good, Harrison said, collecting the pages. Now there is one final step. Our chairwoman likes to personally meet the founders of the companies we acquire. A formality, if you'll follow me. Marcus, numb and hollow, followed. A golden parachute. Maybe. A consulting fee. He was desperate for any scrap. Harrison led him up a private elevator to the 50th floor. The penthouse floor. The doors opened onto a vast, stunning boardroom with a 360-degree view of Seattle. The entire city was laid out before him. A long obsidian table dominated the room. At the far end, facing the window, sat a single figure. A woman silhouetted against the bright morning light. Mr. Thorn, Harrison said, his voice booming in the quiet room. May I present the chairwoman and sole owner of Pendleton Capital Ventures, Ms. Mina Hayes. The chair swiveled. Marcus Thorn looked into the face of the pregnant wife he had abandoned 4 years ago. But this was not the woman he'd left. The weeping, broken woman in the lavender-scented spare room was gone. This woman was sculpted from ice and steel. Her gaze was level, her expression unreadable, and she was wearing a dark blue power suit that probably cost more than his car. Hello, Marcus, Mina said, her voice as cool and clear as the glass surrounding them. It's been a while. Please have a seat. We have so much to discuss. Marcus Thorn's world did not just tilt. It inverted, shattered, and dissolved into a deafening static. His first idiotic thought was, this is a prank. His second was, she's a secretary, a high-level assistant. This is a joke. She's Mina. He stammered, his voice a full octave higher than usual. He tried for a laugh, but it came out like a cough. What is this? What are you doing here? Mina leaned forward, folding her hands on the polished black table. I'm here, Marcus, because I own this building. I own this table, and as of... She glanced at her watch, a slim, elegant Patek Philippe. 3 minutes ago, I own you. Harrison stepped forward, his grandfatherly demeanor gone, replaced by the sharp edge of a corporate executioner. Mr. Thorne, you have been addressing Ms. Mina Hayes, our chairwoman. She is the EH on all internal documentation. She founded Pendleton Capital Ventures. Founded? Marcus's mind was failing to connect the dots. You had nothing. I gave you $50,000. You were living with Chloe. You did. Mina agreed, her voice dangerously pleasant. It was a fresh start fund, I believe your lawyer called it. But you seem to be forgetting my great-uncle Arthur. Arthur Pendleton. He wasn't a fan of yours, Marcus. He left me his hobby. That hobby was Pendleton Capital. The name. Pendleton. It hit Marcus like a physical blow. The blood drained from his face and his ears began to roar. No, he whispered. No, that's not possible. Oh, it's very possible, Mina said. You just never bothered to look back. You were so busy building your new life, you never once wondered what happened to the old one. You just assumed what faded away, disappeared, became a sad little single mother, living on state-mandated child support. She stood up, the picture of power, and walked slowly around the table toward him. She moved with a confidence that made him shrink back in his chair. For 4 years, Marcus, I've watched you, she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, yet it filled the room. I watched you dilute your own stock to pay for Serena's birthday parties. I watched you take on ruinous debt for a product line you knew was flawed, all to impress people you don't even like. And I watched my team buy up every last piece of that debt. Every late-night loan, every desperate bond. They all belong to me. She stopped directly in front of him. He had to crane his neck to look up at her. You called me a burden, she said, her voice devoid of heat, a cold, simple statement of fact. You said I was a vessel. You said I had, lost my fire. She smiled, but it was a terrifying expression. It held no warmth, only triumph. The truth, Marcus, is you were always the burden. I was the one carrying you. The algorithm that started your entire company. I wrote 80% of that code. And in the fine print of the intellectual property agreement you just signed, you handed it and all its derivatives back to me. The one valuable thing your company had left is now mine. Marcus was hyperventilating. His vision was tunneling. The room felt suddenly unbearably hot. You did this. For revenge, Mina laughed, a real, genuine, and utterly chilling laugh. Revenge, she said. Oh, Marcus, you think you're that important? You think I spent 4 years of my life plotting to destroy you? Don't flatter yourself. This wasn't revenge. This was pest control, a hostile takeover, a simple acquisition. She leaned in closer, and his senses were overwhelmed. She smelled of expensive perfume, something dark and complex like sandalwood and victory. You were a loose end, she whispered. My son's last name is Hayes. My name is Hayes. The name Thorne is a stain I've been meaning to wipe clean for a very long time. This wasn't revenge, Marcus. It was just good business. That was the moment he broke. The idea that he wasn't even worthy of her hatred, that this entire, elaborate, 4-year financial execution was just good business to her. It was more than his colossal ego could bear. He made a sound, a strangled, guttural noise. His $1,200 Italian leather briefcase slipped from his nerveless fingers and clattered to the floor. He gasped. I can't. He clutched at his chest, his impeccably tailored suit suddenly feeling like a straitjacket. He tried to stand, but his legs buckled. He wasn't having a heart attack. He was having a humiliation attack. His entire reality, the one built on his own perceived superiority, had been systematically and surgically dismantled by the woman he'd discarded as messy. He collapsed, not in a dramatic cinematic faint, but in a pathetic, clumsy heap. He crumpled against the base of the chair, wheezing his face a mask of sweat and terror. Mina looked down at him, her expression unchanged. She didn't offer a hand. She didn't call for a doctor. She simply stepped back and smoothed the front of her jacket. "Robert," she said, turning to her CEO who was watching with quiet satisfaction. "Yes, Madam Chairwoman. Please have security escort Mr. Thorne from the premises. He's trespassing." "Immediately," Harrison said. 2 uniformed security officers entered the room. They didn't ask questions. They simply and efficiently hauled the sobbing, hyperventilating Marcus Thorne to his feet, one under each arm. "You can't do this!" he shrieked, his last shred of dignity gone. "Mina, please, think of what we had, Mina." Mina had already turned her back. She was looking out at her city, at the skyline she now commanded. "Remove him," she said, and the doors swished shut, cutting off his desperate cries. Marcus was deposited onto the curb outside the Pendleton Tower. The drizzle of the Seattle morning was cold on his sweat-drenched shirt. People in business suits walked past, their eyes sliding over the disheveled man, weeping on the pavement, and then, as polite society dictates, looking quickly away. He fumbled for his phone. He had to call someone. His lawyer. Serena. Anyone. He called Serena. It went straight to voicemail. "Serena, baby. You won't believe what happened. That witch. Mina, she bought the company. He sobbed. She owns everything. Call me back. We have to do something." He called his lawyer, Jonathan Pierce. "Marcus." Pierce's voice was different. It wasn't friendly. It was cold. "I was just about to call you. I've received a cease and desist from Harrison and Stone. I can no longer represent you. What, you're my lawyer? No, Marcus. My firm was retained by Thorne Dynamics, and as Thorne Dynamics now has a new owner, she is my client. And her first instruction was to terminate your relationship with the firm, citing conflict of interest. My second instruction is to inform you that you are to have no contact with any former employees, partners, or assets of the company, effective immediately. You're working for her. I work for the company, Marcus, and you do not. Goodbye." The line clicked dead. Marcus sat on the curb, the rain plastering his hair to his skull. He was in a single hour, utterly alone. He tried Serena again. Voicemail. He took a cab back to the lavish condo he shared with her. He'd have to sell it. No, she would have to sell it. The lease was in his name. Everything was in his name. He stumbled into the apartment, calling her name. "Serena, we have to pack. We have to go." The apartment was quiet, but it wasn't empty. In the master bedroom, Serena's walk-in closet, usually a chaotic explosion of designer labels, was half empty. Her jewelry case was open and vacant. On the bed, in a pristine white envelope, was a note. It wasn't even a letter. It was her engagement ring, the 6-carat cushion-cut diamond he'd bought with a line of credit from the company, and a single slip of paper. "Marcus, my agent just called. My contract with Vance Lifestyle was terminated by the new parent company. They said I violated a morals clause. And then Alexei called from Dubai. He said he just got an email from the new head of my agency, a Ms. Hayes. She bought the entire agency, Marcus. She's freezing my assets. She's cancelling my campaigns. She's ruining me. I can't be with a man who lets this happen. I'm going to Dubai. Alexei is going to help me sort this out. Don't contact me. My lawyer will be in touch. S. He stared at the ring. She hadn't even called. She'd heard the news and had simply evacuated, like a rat leaving a ship that was already at the bottom of the ocean. He sank onto the edge of the bed, the gaudy, overpriced symbol of his betrayal cold in his palm. He had lost his company. He had lost his mistress. He had lost his reputation. He had traded a diamond for a piece of glass, and now the glass had shattered, and the diamond was sitting in a tower owning the world. He looked around the empty, silent room, a monument to a life of hollow surfaces, and for the first time, Marcus Thorne understood what it truly meant to have nothing. The news hit the financial world like a thunderclap. The Seattle Shadow revealed billionaire Mina Hayes ousts ex-husband in shocking hostile takeover. The story was irresistible. It had betrayal sex money and the most satisfying karmic justice the tech world had seen in decades. The blogs and papers were ruthless. They dug up Marcus and Serena's obnoxious Instagram posts, contrasting them with the quiet, dignified silence from Mina Hayes. They found old college photos of a bright-eyed Mina working side by side with a younger Marcus, and the narrative was set. The king built by his queen had exiled her only for her to return and conquer his empty kingdom. Marcus Thorne was a laughingstock. He was a meme. He was founder failure. He was last seen moving his personal items out of a storage unit, his face shielded from a single persistent paparazzo. Mina, on the other hand, gave one and only one statement. She didn't give it to a financial paper. She gave it to a Women in STEM blog. Pendleton Capital Ventures acquired Thorne Dynamics for its core technology, which we believe was deeply mismanaged. We intend to restructure the company, salvage the IP, and refocus on innovation. This was a business decision, plain and simple. We wish Mr. Thorne the best in his future endeavors. The cold, clinical professionalism of the statement was to those who knew the story more brutal than any insult. She didn't even acknowledge their past, and restructure she did. The first thing she did was rename it. Thorne Dynamics was dissolved. The new entity was called Hayes Pendleton Labs. The second thing she did was call a company-wide meeting. The remaining employees, terrified they were all about to be fired, gathered in the main atrium. Mina walked onto the stage. It was the first time most of them had ever seen her. She was not the monster they'd been led to expect. She was calm, focused, and spoke with the authority of someone who knows exactly what she's doing. "Good morning," she said. "I am Mina Hayes. As you know, I am the new owner of this company. I am also, some of you may remember, one of its original architects. I helped write the first line of code this company was built on in a garage 10 years ago." A murmur went through the crowd. "This company lost its way," she continued. "It became obsessed with image and not with innovation. It prioritized marketing over engineering. That ends today. The smart jewelry division is dissolved. The marketing budget is being cut by 90%. All of that capital is being rerouted into R&D. We are going back to basics, building the best data compression software in the world." She looked out at the faces, the tired engineers, the overworked admins. I know what hostile takeover means, she said. It means layoffs, and there will be some. Anyone in a vanity position, your time here is done. This included Marcus's personal assistant, Janice, who was let go an hour later. But for those of you who build, for the coders, the engineers, the designers, your jobs are not only safe, your salaries are being increased by 15%, effective immediately. The culture of fear and flash is over. We are now a culture of innovation. Welcome to Hayes Pendleton Labs. Now let's get to work. The atrium was silent for a beat, then erupted in applause. Mina watched them, a small, private smile on her face. This wasn't revenge. This was restoration. She wasn't just tearing Marcus's empty house down. She was using the materials to build a fortress, a legacy for her son. As for Serena's modeling agency, Mina didn't destroy it. She gutted it. She fired the predatory agents, installed a new female-led board, and changed its entire charter to focus on talent development and financial literacy for young models, ensuring they would never be as vulnerable as Serena had been. Serena herself, after a failed attempt to sue, was last heard of bartending in Dubai, her influencer career over. Mina had taken all the poisoned parts of her past and had, with systematic logical precision, detoxified them. 5 years later. The penthouse office on the 50th floor of the Pendleton Tower no longer felt like a boardroom. It was Mina's private office. One wall was still glass overlooking the city, but the others were covered in books, whiteboards full of complex equations, and children's art. Framed crayon drawings of Mummy's Tower and a stick figure, Liam, sat next to financial awards and patents. The door swished open, and a 9-year-old Liam Hayes ran in his school backpack, slung over one shoulder. Mom. Guess what I got the lead in the school play? I'm the protagonist. Mina laughed, swiveling in her chair to scoop him up in a hug. That's my boy. The protagonist, I always knew it. What's protagonist mean again? He asked, burying his face in her neck. It means you're the hero, she said, kissing the top of his head. You're the center of the story. Cool. Robert Harrison, now happily semi-retired but still on the board, poked his head in. Sorry to interrupt, Mina, but you have a visitor. Someone not on the schedule. Mina's good humor faded slightly. Who is it? It's Marcus Thorne. Mina froze for a split second. She hadn't seen or heard his name outside of her lawyer's do not contact order reports in years. He's at the front desk, Harrison said, his voice laced with disapproval. He says he's a delivery driver for Postmates. He said he has a food delivery for you. Mina looked at Liam, who was now busy at a small table building a complex Lego creation. He didn't even know his father's name. She felt nothing. Not hatred, not anger, not even pity, just a vast empty distance. He was a stranger, a ghost. I didn't order any food, Robert, she said simply. I know, it's a ham sandwich. He's just standing there. He looks old, Mina thought for a moment. She looked at her son, the true center of her universe. She looked at the empire she had built. And she looked at the door. Tell security to send him away, Robert, she said, her voice soft. He's at the wrong address. There's no one here by that name. Very good, Madam Chairwoman. He smiled and was gone. Mina turned back to her son. Hey, protagonist. How about we finish up here and go get some real food, I'm thinking. The best pizza in Seattle. Yeah, Liam cheered. Mina Hayes stood, took her son's hand, and walked out of her office. She didn't look back at the window, didn't spare a thought for the man on the pavement, 50 floors below, a man who had collapsed a second time when the security guard told him, "Sorry, sir, no one by that name works in this building." Marcus Thorne had been erased, not by revenge, but by irrelevance. Mina and Liam walked into the elevator, their laughter echoing in the polished steel. She had her past, her present, and her future all in one. She was the architect. She was the hero. She was the center of her own story. And it was a story that was just beginning. And so Mina Hayes proved that the greatest revenge isn't loud, it's silent. It's not about tearing someone down. It's about building yourself up so high that they can't even cast a shadow on you. Marcus Thorne didn't just lose his company. He lost his legacy. He became a footnote in the story of the woman he'd tried to throw away. Mina didn't just get her comeback. She built an empire from the rubble of his betrayal, proving that a burden can become a boss and a vessel can become a vanguard. The ultimate justice is living a life so full and successful that your detractors become nothing more than a bad memory. What did you think of Mina's ultimate comeback? Was it the coldest revenge or just the smartest business? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you loved this story of justice and vindication, please hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to see a true boss in action. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories every single week. We all have a comeback story in us. What's yours?